Hello everyone, welcome back to another economics lesson from Hatch Tutors. In today's video, I'm going to be covering the theory of demand, which is one of the most important concepts to know in economics. So with that being said, let's begin. So the economic definition of demand states that the demand for a good is the quantity that would be purchased at each of various alternative prices, given or holding constant, ceteris paribus, all the other factors influencing purchases of the good. So it's important to note here the ceteris paribus assumption, which just means all other things being equal. So when you're considering demand and the changes in demand, you're kind of just assuming every other factor that you're not looking at is remaining constant. So otherwise, you'd just be dealing with like too many different changing factors, and that would be too complicated. For example, maybe like the demand is shifting up because of one reason, but then you might say, oh, what if consumers suddenly don't like it, or like the news said it was bad, or something like that. Like you just want to assume everything else is holding constant. So yeah, that's why we use the ceteris paribus assumption. And effective demand is, it just means a want that's backed by money and the willingness to pay for a good. And it's important to remember that demand is only, really effective when there's money to back it up. Because, like, you could want all the things you want, but, like, if you can't actually purchase it, then, like, the demand for it isn't really there, if that makes any sense. So what is the theory of demand? So as you can see from this graph, it's a standard supply and demand graph without the supply curve. So here it's just focusing on the demand curve for a steak in this certain town, and as you can see, the demand schedule or the x and y values of the price and the quantity demanded, you can see that in the graph. Let's say if it was $10, you look at the price, which is on the y-axis. $10, line that up. That's about it's about 20,000 kilograms roughly, and then so on and so forth. As you can see here, as the P goes up, the QD goes down. What that means is, as the price increases, the quantity demanded goes down. And I know I explained there's a difference between an increase in demand and an increase in quantity demanded. And quantity demanded changes only when the price changes. So like whether the price goes up or down, it's a movement along the demand curve. The demand curve itself does not move. So let's say at 80,000, it was about $4. So if the price were $4, about 80,000 kilograms of steak would be demanded. Let's say the price goes up to $6 now. As you can see, the quantity demanded goes up to $50,000, but the demand curve itself did not move. So that's important to distinguish the difference between quantity demanded and demand itself. And this makes logical sense because if you think about it, as consumers, you always want the cheapest price. So the cheaper it gets, the more likely people are going to want it. So like at $2, 120,000 kilograms of steak would be demanded, because obviously it's a lot cheaper than $10. And you may have noticed it's not exactly proportional. So like if it goes down by $2, it only goes up by 10,000, but then it goes down another $2, then it goes down, and then the quantity demanded increases by 20,000, and like you can see, it's not exactly linear, and that's also important to remember. Not all demand curves are going to be like strictly linear. As you can see, this is a slightly curved one. It's not a straight line. So yeah, that's mainly what the theory of demand is. It's just that as price increases, quantity demanded goes down. And in the next slide, I'm going to explain when demand itself actually shifts. So as you can see here, I have a typical supply and demand graph for any good X. And the demand curve, when it moves to the right or to the left, these are going to be what causes it. So the first, we call it non-price determinants because they're not related to price and they're not like price, right? So so these actually cause shifts to go right or left in the demand curve. So the first one is going to be taste and preferences. So like maybe suddenly people just let's say for good X it's butter. So taste and preferences. Maybe people don't like butter anymore, or like the news has been reporting that butter is not good for you, so on and so forth. Then demand for butter is going to decrease. So like what that means is that all prices, there's going to be less quantity demanded because less people actually want it, right? And it's not related to the price of the butter itself. So yeah, I put seasonal changes in brackets because maybe it changes from like time to time, right? Maybe suddenly people will like butter again, then demand will go out to the right for butter. And then next one is incomes, as well as normal and inferior goods. So first, the first part, incomes. So like as consumer incomes increase for a normal good, which just means that when your income increases, you're gonna buy more of it because let's say for steak, it's a normal good. If you have more money, you're likely going to be treating yourself to steak more often. And if your income goes lower, then of course you're going to be buying less steak because it becomes expensive. Now, an inferior good is a good which is the opposite. So when your income goes up, you tend to buy less of it. And when your income goes down, you tend to buy more of it. So an example of an inferior good would be something like, let's say Spam. So Spam obviously isn't the most high quality meat. So let's say if you have a little less income, you're more likely to buy Spam because it's cheap and you want some meat in your diet, right? But when you have more income access, then you're more likely to drop the Spam in favor for like steak or something, which is hopefully highlights the difference between normal and inferior goods. And then the next non-price determinant are substitutes and complements. So what that means is, let's say we'll use butter as an example. So a substitute for butter would be, let's say, margarine. So if the price of margarine suddenly went down a lot, then people would be likely to switch to margarine because it's a substitute for butter, which means the demand would shift to the left and demand would decrease for butter. On the flip side, if the price of margarine went up, then the demand for butter would likely go up as well because obviously they're substitutes. And then complements. What that means is it's a good that usually is bought in tandem with the good in question. So let's say with butter, bread goes really well with it. Obviously, there's probably a better example, but I just want to use bread because it's the first one I thought of. So let's say the price of butter, let's say the price of bread suddenly goes up. Well, let's say people only bought butter with bread for some reason. Well, if the price of bread went up, then they're less likely to buy butter because they're, less likely to buy bread, if that makes any sense. So, like, bread's going to be more expensive. That means people are going to be less likely to buy bread. On the flip side, if bread suddenly becomes cheaper, then people are more likely to buy butter because butter goes well with bread, and everyone only buys butter with bread in this example. So, the demand for butter would then shift to the right. Moving on to the fourth non-price determinant, it's going to be expectations, consumer expectations to be exact. So let's say consumers expect the government to raise taxes or something. Then they're going to be more likely to, let's say, save their money because they're not going to know what's going to happen in the future, right? So they're likely to buy less butter, assuming butter's a normal good, of course. They're likely to buy less butter, which means demand for it is going down. Expectations is kind of a shaky one. I would say you just need to kind of know it's what consumers expect is going to happen in the future and like future forecasts, stuff like that. And then the final non-price determinant is going to be population. So let's say this is a demand for butter in the U.S. And let's say the U.S. suddenly gets a huge surge of immigrants from another country, like a bunch of people immigrate to the U.S. That means the demand for butter is likely going to shift out, and it's going to increase. And the reason for that is because, there's more people now. So no matter what, they're gonna be a greater number of people at every price point possible that are going to demand butter. So the demand for butter is going to go out. Same thing with if a bunch of people emigrate, like leave the U.S. to immigrate to another country for some reason, then the demand for butter would likely go down. And let's say the demand for butter in that country they're immigrating to would go up. So hopefully that made sense, and you guys understand these 5 non-price determinants that cause shifts in demand. So it's important. Once again, it's important to remember that these are the only things that change, that actually shift the demand curve. While price, on the other hand, only causes movement along the demand curve. So yeah, that's the main takeaway for today. But anyways, I hope you guys were able to learn something from this video. If you did, please remember to leave a like, subscribe to our channel, And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below, and we will try our best to answer them. Thank you once again for watching.